Our NBA Cup runneth over. Matt and Haize will debate whether Luka is crumbling in crunch time and if Dyson Daniels is the real deal or is he just a trade steal. That's all ahead today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can start the season with the big return on FanDuel. New customers will get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com today to get started. I'm Doug Branson, host of the Locked On Hornets podcast, and your shot clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories with the help of Locked On's local experts. And with me are two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast and senior writer for the Action Network. We've got Matt Moore, and from the Locked On Bulls podcast, it is Haize. Matt, Haize, a lot of storylines last night in the NBA Cup opener. One of the most anticipated games of last night was Mavericks at Warriors, and it did not disappoint unless you were a Mavs fan hoping for a big fourth quarter from Luka Doncic. Let's hear from Nick Angstedt, and slightly biased, of Locked On Mavs.
Stars have to show up when it matters. And for Luka Doncic right now, he showed up in the first three quarters. Awesome. Carried them. Was the only thing going for them offensively for the first three quarters, right? Like 31 points, all in the first three quarters, carrying them, did a ton on offense the whole half the game. And then the fourth quarter comes along and he didn't have anything left. He was probable going into this game. He's on the injury report again. If it's conditioning coming into the season, it looked like he was in quicksand. He was running uphill a lot of time, and he didn't have anything left in that fourth quarter. And so when the ball was given him on offense, 0 of 3 from the field in the fourth quarter, and on defense, just over and over, the Warriors were just hunting him over and over again. And there's a bunch of other reasons why the Mavs lost this game, but I'm going to start with Luka because it rises and falls on the star if he wants to be considered one of the best, or the best player in the NBA, and he's not right now.
Okay, that's Nick Angstedt's take. Matt, what's your take on Luka in crunch time? Is he failing the Mavericks, or are his teammates failing him?
Yeah, I mean, look, Luka hasn't been great to start the season. Like, if you just look at the overall numbers, the overall efficiency, he hasn't been great. He just hasn't been to his standard. Long season, he'll get there. I think the conditioning thing is probably apt. There is a thing that kind of happens with him where if he gets off to a hot start doing the ISO hero ball stuff, he'll just keep running into that wall over and over and over again. And then he's going to gas out, especially when you're facing a defense like the Warriors. Steph got him on a deflection in the post. That was not great late in the game. And like a lot of this is like Luka always settles for basically the hardest shot possible. He never tries to generate like a clean, good look. Like Steph shots look hard, but they're very comfortable for him. Luka aims for very difficult shots, and your return on that's always going to be lower. So I think Luka could play differently, but he's had a lot of success getting here. I think he'll probably be fine by the end of the season.
Luka Doncic is 4 for 20 in fourth quarters of the last 4 games for the Dallas Mavericks. That's ugly. That's bad. Like that's
great
for Luka. It's definitely not up to standard, and I think condition probably is a big part of that. And he'll be fine as the season goes on. But like right now, he is failing his team. He is the star of that team. He came in with the best odds to win MVP. All this type of stuff. Not that odds make a big difference on how your season is going to go, but like that's the level that people look at Luka Doncic at. And right now, he's failing that view and that opinion of him. There's no way around it. He's been bad in fourth quarters. And honestly, Luka Doncic hasn't really had a plus fourth quarter since October 31st, Halloween. It's bad.
Okay, it's bad, but is it the sole reason that they've been, in the words of Nick Angstedt, they've been mid? The Mavericks have been mid to start the season. I mean, what else is going on here in Dallas?
I mean, they're 0-3 in games decided by 3 points or less. They haven't really gotten any sort of like of the easy games yet, which is where they really feast. Their model is basically beat up on the bad teams, get to the playoffs, and then, face a Thunder team that's not ready, and then a great matchup versus the Wolves. But in general, like the whole thing is kind of like beat up on the bad teams. This is not like a dominant going to compete with everybody team in the regular season. They're up there. I think they're good. I think they're better than their record. But I also think that they're still trying to figure out a lot. And I think especially defensively, like they don't have the same quite level of grit. They are missing PJ Washington. That's a pretty big absence for them, but they're not quite the team that they were at the end of last season. I think they're more talented. They're just not quite that team, but there's a lot of time for it.
I think also missing. Gotta love it.
We got a guest on. We got a new guest on the show. Matt Moore's cat would like to have some takes on this show.
Not allowed in the studio.
Haize, let me ask you this on the defensive front. So, Kidd last night seemed to really ride Daniel Gafford, particularly late in the game, over Derek Lively. Were your eyebrows raised at that decision? Because I mean, Lively was such a big part of their finals run last season.
Yeah, for sure. Like not having Derek Lively there, and I also think that not having Derek Jones Jr. there for them as well is hurting them defensively. That's why they don't have the same defensive kind of oomph that they had last season. They'll get there, right? And I think Derek Lively is a good player that eventually, like you can only ignore him for so long. Daniel Gafford's one of those players too, where Gafford's always had like he has hot streaks. Like Gafford will have a really good 5 games in a row, and then like 3 or 4 games after that, you'll forget he's on the court during large periods of time. So there's that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, but like Gafford got hit with like a rough charge call last night and then got blocked because Draymond made an absolutely incredible play. And then there was like a turnover where Klay Thompson just missed the pass off for him in transition. Like Gafford, I thought actually played really well last night. And then the plus minus kind of bears it out there. +2 with him, -5 with Lively. I'm like captain of the Derek Lively is the future of the Mavericks and going to be a top 10 center in a couple of years team. But I think last night was way more about kind of just bad luck on Gafford's part. I thought he was playing fine down the stretch.
Speaking of captains, the big storyline from that game, of course, Klay Thompson returning to Golden State. There were tribute videos. There were captain hats out for Klay as he made his way through the tunnel. But it was Steph Curry who stole the show. With more, here's Charlie Walter and Matt Kolsky of Locked On Warriors on Steph's big run in the fourth quarter.
Steph Curry scoring the final 12 points and putting on a vintage performance in front of a raucous crowd.
Steph has now entered a pantheon of 2. It's him and LeBron James for playing at this level at this age. Do not sleep on what the Warriors are doing because 2 of the 4 titles that they won in the last decade.
Unexpected. Not just unexpected, but won by types of teams that almost everybody believed could not win a title. And if an 11-man rotation is the next version of that, I am not going to be shocked.
Okay, how long can we realistically expect Steph to play like this? Because he is on another level to start this season after he comes back from the injury. And how long can you expect the Warriors to play at this level without a reliable wingman in the starting unit? Matt, is Buddy Hield off the bench going to be enough?
No. They need another significant weapon. Like, it's not a secret that's why they're trying to trade for Lauri Markkanen. Like, they know that. This is great. This is an early start. It's going to probably get them in the playoffs and avoid them having to battle out of the play-in tournament again, and that's great. The problem with age is not your best. It's the consistency starts to go. When you're young, you don't know how to be consistent. When you're old, your body can't help you be consistent. And that's what starts to go. So Steph's going to have these nights where he looks absolutely amazing. And he's going to have more nights where not more nights than not, but like he'll have some nights where it's like, oh, Steph was only like good, not great or okay. And that's just how it goes. And we see this with every single athlete. Even LeBron has this now where there's nights where it's just like, yeah, LeBron was fine. And then there's nights where they're absolutely spectacular. And if you can just get enough, then maybe you can pull a rabbit out of a hat, but you can't do that without getting a consistent star that can create on his own. They need somebody who can create shots on their own because they have so many athletes and so many great players, but they need one more guy that can do his own thing, I think, on that Warriors team.
And I would lean towards what Matt's saying to agree there, but I think we saw what this Warriors team did when Steph was out, and maybe I'm just a little caught up in that, but I do think that Buddy Hield, if all we're asking Buddy Hield to do is say on the games where Steph doesn't have it, Buddy, we need for you to make sure you have a mixture between you, Draymond's defense, Kuminga's being productive off the bench since he's moved there. I think they have enough to stay afloat in the Western Conference during the regular season. If we're talking about them being some type of title contender, they're absolutely going to need another wingman for that. But for the regular season, I think that they have enough to stay competitive and afloat in the regular season. I think that their defense and Draymond being locked in again defensively, like this, Draymond is having a renaissance defensively, and it's been really fun to watch. But the meltdown's going to probably come at some point too. But I think they have enough during the regular season.
All right, coming up on Locked On NBA, we've already had a cat cameo, but it is an Atlanta Hawk that is using his paws right now that has everyone talking. We'll talk about that coming up. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And so when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, and I know you get the hunches, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And today, I'm looking at the NBA, of course, because this is Locked On NBA. And we're going to talk about somebody who is climbing the ranks in Defensive Player of the Year. Now, I don't want to give it away yet, but I do want to tell you that Victor Wembanyama is still leading that category at FanDuel Sportsbook at -190, plus 1,000, Evan Mobley, followed by Anthony Davis. But we're not talking about any of those players coming up, so stay tuned. All right, so when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter, so make them your first read of the day. Go to LockedOnDaily.com, LockedOnDaily.com. Subscribe to stay up to date with local expert analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel of Basketball Feelings and Mike Shearer of Basketball Poetry. And of course, you got to get those Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from our good guy over at Locked On Fantasy Basketball, Josh Lloyd. I mentioned in the last segment Steph stealing the show in Golden State, but no one, and I mean no one, is doing more stealing right now than Dyson Daniels of the Atlanta Hawks. His 28 points, 7 assists, and 6 steals helped the Hawks bag a cup win, a big upset win over the Celtics as 16-point underdogs. Brad Rowland, host of Locked On Hawks, tells us more about Daniels' impact.
Boston had the better shooting numbers pretty solidly in this game. They're the better shooting team. Even with Trey and Bogey, they're the better shooting team. And part of the upset is that the Hawks had to overcome that, and they did it by winning on the margins. They also forced 20 turnovers in this game, including 16 live ball steals in this one. That is the most steals by a Hawks team in a game in almost 5 full years. That was a huge factor, of course, led by Dyson Daniels, who is probably the league's preeminent ball hawk right now. He's been incredible at getting into passing lanes, creating steals, etc., etc. This win was one you shouldn't have gotten, quote unquote. Whereas maybe it replaces one of the losses that you probably shouldn't have lost. And suddenly you're 5-7 again. And by the way, in the East, 5-7 is in totally fine shape.
Okay, I can't get away from social media without seeing some kind of statistic involving Dyson Daniels and Alvin Robertson, or Dyson Daniels and AI and all of these steal numbers. Are we making too much of the gaudy steal numbers, Haize, or is this a player in Dyson Daniels that can change the direction of the Hawks?
I mean, I think it's going to take a lot more than Dyson Daniels to change the direction of the Hawks, but the steal numbers are amazing. You even looked at last year with the Pelicans, even in his minuscule role there. I mean, let me not say minuscule. He averaged 22 minutes for them, but he averaged 1.4 steals per game. I think that Dyson Daniels is just a ball hawk, and I think he's between playing a position now that makes more sense for him. He's been given a lot more opportunity. He's in rhythm. He's playing off confidence, and I think he was a top 8 pick for a reason, a top 10 pick in the draft for a reason. So I think the Dyson Daniels paired with Jalen Johnson, they're starting to have a nice young core there in Atlanta that I think people have kind of underrated a little bit. But I like Dyson Daniels a lot, and I don't know if he's going to keep up the 3.5 steals per game, but I think he's gonna stay high up in the league in steals per game for sure.
His last 4 games, 6 steals, 6 steals, 7 steals, 4 steals. Are you kidding me? Like, these numbers are ridiculous. The one thing I will say, the scouting report does get out on defenders as well as offensive players. And there will get to be emphasis from coaching staffs about, hey, I know he looks like he's smaller and slighter. He's really good on the handle. Don't try and press him. And and respect his ability to defend. And they'll probably, they'll go down, and just steals are hard to kind of maintain there. I was actually just more impressed with Dyson's offense last night. I liked him a lot as a prospect. I liked him a lot as a rookie. But, when they trade him, I was like, yeah, good player, but this is fine for a return for DeJounte Murray. And he looks like a steal right now, no pun intended, because like last night, he puts a post move on against Derek White and hits it. Like, he's making all sorts of moves, making great reads. Like Dyson, he's finishing at like a 70th percentile rate. Dyson looks like a complete player now. And I'll say, yeah, I do think that this changes things. When you have Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson and Reese Shea, guess what? Now you have a young core that you can actually build around, which makes it a lot easier to finally let go of who in Atlanta.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So I'll kick it to you, Haize. I mean, does the rise of Dyson Daniels alongside those other young core pieces, as Matt said, does that make it easier for them to move on from Trae Young, or should they, include Trae Young in whatever they're building there?
I think you have to move on from Trae Young, and it's nothing against Trae, but I think that what you can get back for him value wise by moving him and help build off this young core, I think it's worth it more than trying to fight with this thing with Trae Young. Like, I think that what you have here now in a young core being built, this does afford you the luxury to go ahead and move on from Trae.
Okay, let's flip it over to Boston, who went down as 16-point favorites to the Hawks, but they weren't the only major upset of the night. The Heat grabbed defeat from the claws of victory against Detroit in overtime. That was a crazy finish. And the Timberwolves gave up 122 points to a team in the Portland Trail Blazers who Matt called awful a few episodes ago. Let's hear some reactions from Locked On Celtics and Locked On Wolves.
Complete lack of effort from the Boston Celtics. It cost them the game against the Atlanta Hawks, but let's be honest. They had this coming, didn't they? As Jaylen Brown said after the game, we came out expecting to win. They thought they had the win just in the bag.
The Wolves came out sloppy, got beat by 14 to an inferior and shorthanded Portland Trail Blazers team in the first game of the NBA Cup. This was just a really disappointing performance against a far inferior opponent that was shorthanded, and now you got to play them again on Wednesday. And in whatever the film session is going to be in the morning, this team has to respond. They just have to.
Okay, Matt, who had the bigger wake-up call last night? Was it the Boston Celtics or the Minnesota Timberwolves?
I was Minnesota. You cannot lose to Portland. Like, this is, look, I harp on this all the time. If you want to build up a great regular season record, these are the games you need to win. This is on the road, so it's not one of those. Usually you need to win home games, but you need to win division games and games versus teams under 500. That's how you build it, is beat the bad teams and beat your division opponents because you play them more. This was a division opponent that's definitely going to finish under 500. They're going to finish under 300, and you lost outright by double digits. This is complacency, and that's very worrisome. They do not have the same hunger that they did last year, where they were really pushing and they were playing together and motivated. They started buying into the hype. Boston gets to do that. They won the title. They'll be fine. The Wolves do not. This was a very disappointing loss, I thought, for the Wolves.
Yeah, definitely the Wolves. I mean, Anthony Simons played 5 minutes in this game. You allowed 4 players off the bench to get in double digits. You don't have an edge. You don't have an identity right now. And I understand that you traded Cat away, but that's not really an excuse for this. You lost to the Portland Trail Blazers, to Matt's point, by double digits, easily. That should be the bigger wake-up call here.
Coming up on the Locked On NBA podcast, we've got more on the NBA Cup, and we've got something on the Indiana Pacers. Are we sleeping on one of the stars there in Indiana? And some breaking news that hit just as we started taping on Greg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs. That's all ahead on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of the Locked On NBA podcast is brought to you by our friends at Mint Mobile. Here's the deal with the big wireless providers. What they advertise and what you actually pay are often two very different things. Between that storefront sign and your first bill, the price tag can somehow double thanks to hidden fees and surprise charges. With Mint Mobile, though, that's just not the case. They say $15 a month for a 3-month plan, and they mean it. Imagine saying goodbye to monthly bills that make your jaw drop and wondering why you've got extra charges. Mint Mobile is premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. Every plan includes high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, and it all runs on the nation's largest 5G network. Keep your current phone and bring along your numbers and your contacts. It all comes with you. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, just go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on the unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. More Locked On Hornets, more Locked On NBA ahead. That's my first one. I got to put it in the jar. It only took 2 weeks. I'm proud of myself. I thought it was going to be in the first 2 episodes. No, we are back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. There's a free daily Locked On podcast for your favorite NBA team, including the Locked On Hornets podcast. Search your favorite podcast app for Locked On and your favorite team today. The Indiana Pacers have been tough to get a read on so far. They've beaten good teams. They've been beaten badly by good teams. They've beaten bad teams. They've been beaten badly by bad teams. But Locked On Pacers host Tony Haize says one thing on the Pacers has been consistent, and that's Pascal Siakam.
Siakam has been balling this year. You've watched the Pacers, you know it. Even on nights where he's not as impactful, he has you look at the end of the game and you're like, oh, he had 15, 6, and 8. That's a great game, right? And he's defending better. He is averaging exactly 20 points per game, 4.5 assists per game, and 6.5 rebounds per game. Easy round numbers to talk about. There are 12 players in the NBA currently achieving those numbers. That would be Jokic, Sabonis, Tatum, Giannis, LeBron, Julius Randle, Siakam, Luka, Paolo before he got hurt, James Harden, Cade Cunningham, Zion Williamson. Pretty dang good group of players to be associated with. Right, there's been a lot of other storylines that are bigger getting in the way of talking about him, which is why I keep calling Siakam the metronome. He just keeps beating at the same pace, playing the way he does, doing very well, beating to his own drum. And then it's almost an afterthought, which is not fair because he's playing excellent basketball and deserves this kind of discussion.
Ask and you shall receive, Tony East. We will discuss it right now. Is Pascal Siakam being forgotten in Indiana? Does he deserve more love, Haize?
Yeah, I think he deserves more love, and not just because of his play, but because of how mid Tyrese Halliburton has been over the course of this season. Benedict Mathurin, Pascal Siakam, they're both outplaying Tyrese Halliburton right now. And so, the Pacers are 5-5 on the season. They're 500 so far. They haven't been world beaters, had an amazing performance or anything like that. But Pascal is a big reason why that team's been able to win basketball games. And I think his two-way play and what he's able to do has been a huge reason of that. So if we're going to talk about the Pacers, Pascal Siakam deserves to be talked about. Now, the bigger question here is, why are we talking about the Pacers? But I love Tony, so it is what it is.
Look, I think it's been weird. People are very Halliburton has become this polarizing player. And so everyone just focuses on Halliburton. Yeah. He has a bad start to the season and it's everything was a fraud. He just had a good 2 months. He was never great. And I'm just why is Tyrese Halliburton getting this kind of negative attention? How are you a Halliburton hater? I don't understand this. But with Siakam, here's a stat for you. With him on the floor this season, they have been pretty great. They're plus 5.1 in net rating. That's pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. They are minus 20 per 100 possessions when Siakam's off the floor. They get murdered when he is not on the floor. He has been absolutely pivotal to them having any sort of success. I think that will improve as Tyrese Halliburton pulls out of the slump and they get healthier because they are missing a lot of guys. But Siakam's holding it up, and it's, the consistency is really important. It's also consistent versatility. This is my big thing with Siakam is Pascal's a great finisher. He's a good shooter. He's a good passer. He's a good rebounder. He's a good defender. There are no weaknesses in Pascal Siakam's game. He will have issues in certain matchups, and there are certain things that can give him problems. He's solvable from certain aspects, but he contributes in so many different ways and does it so consistently that, Tony East is right. We should talk about this guy more, but he's in Indiana, and people feel like Haize does for some reason.
Well, and I was going to answer Hayes' question. We're talking about the Pacers because they're 5-5 in the Eastern Conference, which makes them kings. They are the 5th seed right now in an Eastern Conference that is mired in mediocrity. So that's why we're talking about them. And I think we'll continue to talk about them because as Matt was kind of alluding to, I mean, I don't expect Tyrese Halliburton to stay like this for the entire season. And if the East continues to struggle, then I think the Pacers could set themselves up nicely as we move on.
Do we think Hallie's going to shoot 41% from the field and 27% from three? Because that's what we're talking about here. Is like 27%. We think Tyrese Halliburton is going to shoot 27%. Come on now. This is just
that would be crazy.
This is just a
well, and yeah, I mean, he looked like in the game that I covered, the Pacers Hornets game, it looked like he had a little bit of a case of the yips. I mean, there were just baskets that he was missing near the rim that just didn't make any sense, unless you take into context some of the injury stuff that that has been nagging him to start the season. Maybe that is affecting him more than we realize. Okay, let's move on to some breaking news that hit from Shams Charania of ESPN just before we started taping this show. And it is the Spurs announcing that head coach Greg Popovich suffered a mild stroke on November 2nd at the Frostbank Center. He's expected to make a full recovery, but no timeline for his return has been determined. Mitch Johnson has been serving as the interim head coach in the meantime. On tomorrow's Locked On NBA, we will have reaction from Locked On Spurs. But Matt, your reaction to the news as we know it right now.
Just wanting the best for him. Popovich is an icon in the sport. He's arguably the greatest coach of all time. He's somebody that invests not only in his players and his team as players, but he invests in them as people, and that's pretty well known. There's a reason why everyone kind of responds to him, and everyone has such, gives him these warm receptions and embraces whenever they see him, even if they've never played for him. It's been such a hard couple of years for Pop. He lost his wife a few years ago, and it's just been, really difficult. And it's just kind of a reminder, I think, to always really value the moment and be present in the good times, because sometimes this stuff hits in waves. I'm just hopeful that Pop can make a full recovery.
Yeah, I hope Pop can recover as soon as possible. Like, prayers up to him and everyone around him, because Pop is such a icon in this sport and in the NBA and just everything basketball related. He's a good guy. I did get to meet Greg Popovich once in my lifetime, so it's just like it sucks, just to be quite frank with it. But I hope that he has a speedy recovery, and if anyone knows Pop, he's going to have probably the best attitude about it that you can expect. So.
Yeah, and he's such a towering figure in the NBA, unflappable. And so when stuff like this happens, it doesn't make sense in our brains. Like, an NBA without Greg Popovich in it is difficult to tackle. But we will keep you abreast of this story, and we'll have reaction from Locked On Spurs tomorrow. In terms of this episode of Locked On NBA, that is going to do it. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. If you didn't like something you heard today from maybe Matt Moore or Haize or me, then let us know on YouTube. I want to hear that too. I will tell you that, Matt and Haize, that our love for the NBA Cup, I'm not going to say it was reciprocated in the YouTube comments. People were not loving the NBA Cup, and they thought it was meaningless. But here's what I'll tell you. Every time you hate on the NBA Cup in the comments, it only makes me love it more. I will cancel out your hate. I want to embrace joy. I want to love the NBA Cup. I'm going to buy one of those hats that instead of the NBA logo, it's just going to say NBA Cup on it. I'm going to be the biggest fan.
We had such phenomenal games last night. Eric Spoelstra called a timeout he didn't have. You're not getting that if it's not the NBA Cup. It was amazing. Embrace the cup.
And the blue courts, they're so blue.
So good. So great.
Okay, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Enjoy tonight's action, and there is a lot of it, and we're going to be back to help you digest all of it. Be kind to each other. We'll see you right back here on the next episode of Locked On NBA.